A man found his orc ex-wife begging in the street. What happened next destroyed him. The rain fell like 1,000 tiny daggers on the cobblestone streets of Aldermore, turning the gray city into a shimmering nightmare of cold and misery. Cedric pulled his cloak tighter around his shoulders as he hurried through the merchant quarter, his boots splashing through puddles that reflected the dying light of evening torches. He had important business to attend to, a meeting with the guildmaster about expanding his father's trading routes. His life had fallen into a comfortable rhythm over the past 5 years. Predictable, safe, hollow. He almost didn't see her. At first, she was just another shadow hunched against the stone wall of the baker's shop, another beggar among dozens that lined these streets after the war. But something made him stop. Perhaps it was the way her massive shoulders curved inward, trying to make herself smaller. Perhaps it was the particular shade of green visible beneath the torn, mud-stained cloak, a green like deep forest moss after rain. His heart stopped. The wooden cup in her enormous hands trembled as she held it out to passing merchants who hurried by without a glance. Her hands, those hands that had once cradled his face with such impossible gentleness, despite their size and strength, were now covered in grime and calluses. A crude sign leaned against the wall beside her, written in shaky common tongue. Hungry. Anything helps. Gracia? The word escaped his lips before he could stop it. Barely a whisper, but her pointed ears caught it instantly. She looked up, and Cedric felt the world tilt beneath him. 5 years. 5 years since he'd last seen that face. The angular features, the small tusks that curved upward from her lower jaw, the eyes that had once blazed with fierce pride and love, now hollow and dim. Her once glossy black hair hung in matted tangles around her face. But it was her. It was unmistakably her. Cedric. His name sounded broken coming from her lips, like something she'd forgotten how to say properly. He stood frozen, his mind racing through 1,000 questions, 1,000 memories, 1,000 regrets. The successful merchant, the respectable son of House Aldwyn, the man who had everything, reduced to a statue in the rain, staring at the woman he'd once promised to love forever. What destroyed him wasn't the shock of seeing her like this. It was the way she immediately looked down, pulling her cloak tighter around her massive frame, as if trying to disappear, as if she was ashamed for him to see what she'd become, as if she thought he'd walk away. And the worst part? 5 years ago he had. But we need to go back. Back to when Cedric was a different man. Back to when love seemed stronger than the hatred between their worlds. 7 years earlier, the borderlands between human territories and orc lands were a patchwork of tension and occasional violence. Trade happened, but it was careful, controlled, always on the verge of collapse. Cedric was 23, fresh from his merchant apprenticeship, assigned by his father to negotiate a timber contract with the Ironbark clan. He'd expected savages. That's what everyone called them. Brutal, mindless monsters who solved every problem with violence. He'd been terrified during the 3-day journey to their settlement, imagining being torn apart the moment he arrived. What he found instead changed everything. The Ironbark settlement was built into the forest itself. Massive structures of wood and stone that seemed to grow from the earth rather than being constructed upon it. The orcs who greeted him were imposing, certainly. Towering figures with green skin and powerful builds that made him feel like a child by comparison. But they were also organized, intelligent, and operated under a code of honor so strict it made human nobility look hypocritical by comparison. And then he met Gracia. She was the daughter of Morgra, the clan's war chief and spiritual leader. At nearly 7 feet tall, with skin the color of summer leaves and eyes like polished amber, she should have terrified him. Instead, when she smiled, a careful smile that barely showed her tusks, something in Cedric's chest cracked open. She was assigned as his guide and translator during the negotiations. For 3 days, they walked the forest together, and Cedric discovered that beneath the intimidating exterior was a woman of incredible depth. She spoke 4 languages fluently. She could identify every plant in the forest and its uses. She had a laugh that started deep in her chest and bubbled up like a spring. She asked him questions about human philosophy and culture with genuine curiosity, and when she listened, she gave him her complete attention in a way no one ever had before. On the last night, under stars that seemed close enough to touch, she asked him, "Do you fear me, Cedric of Aldermore?" He should have said yes. Any sensible human would have. But instead, he found himself saying, "No, I fear that I'll have to leave tomorrow and never see you again." Her eyes widened, and in that moment, he saw his own feelings reflected back at him. It was insane. It was impossible. Humans and orcs didn't fall in love. Their worlds were too different. Their peoples too hostile. It would never work. And yet, over the next year, Cedric found every excuse to return to Ironbark territory. Trade negotiations that could have been handled by letter suddenly required in-person meetings. Contracts needed reviewing. New opportunities needed exploring. His father was pleased with his dedication to expanding the business. His father had no idea that Cedric's heart was no longer his own. Grasha met him in secret at first, in clearings far from both their settlements, in neutral territories where neither human nor orc held sway. They talked for hours. She taught him the oral histories of her people, the warrior's code that governed orc society, the spiritual beliefs about ancestor spirits and the natural world. He shared human poetry, philosophy, the complex web of politics that governed his world. But it wasn't just intellectual. When Grasha touched him, her massive hand engulfing his entirely, it was with a tenderness that made him understand that strength and gentleness were not opposites. When he made her laugh, watching her try to hide her tusks behind her hand because she'd been taught that humans found them monstrous, he wanted to kiss every part of her that the world told her was wrong. And eventually, he did. Their first kiss was awkward, a matter of logistics as much as emotion. She had to kneel down. He had to stand on his toes. Her tusks made angles complicated. But when their lips finally met, when he felt the warmth of her breath and tasted the mint leaves she'd been chewing, nothing else mattered. Not the physical differences, not the cultural divide, not the impossibility of it all. They were in love. Truly, deeply, impossibly in love. For 2 years they existed in that secret space between worlds. But secrets like that can't stay hidden forever. Eventually they had to make a choice. End it or fight for it. They chose to fight. The wedding was small and conducted in secret by a sympathetic human priest who believed love transcended species. No family attended. No friends witnessed. Just Cedric, Grasha, and the gods they both prayed would protect what they were building. Grasha moved to Aldermoor. She left her clan, her mother, her entire world to be with him. The plan was simple. Cedric would break the news to his father gradually, prove that their marriage could work, show the city that orcs weren't monsters. Love would be enough. Love had to be enough. It wasn't. The first month was the hardest. Grasha couldn't walk down the street without people staring, whispering, pulling their children close as if she might devour them. Shopkeepers refused to serve her. The city guard followed her everywhere, hands on their weapons. She tried to be kind, to smile, to show them she meant no harm, but every friendly gesture was interpreted as a threat. Cedric defended her constantly, getting into arguments with merchants, old friends, even family members. "She's my wife," he'd say, over and over, as if repeating it enough times would make them understand. "She's my wife, and she's a good person, and you will treat her with respect." But respect never came. His father, Theron, was the worst. The head of House Aldwin took one look at Grasha and declared that his son had brought shame upon their family. "That creature," he spat, refusing to even use her name, "will destroy everything we've built. The other noble houses are already whispering. We're losing contracts. The guild is questioning our judgment. End this madness before it's too late." Cedric refused. He loved her. That should have been enough. But then the consequences started piling up. Theron was right about the contracts. Trade agreements his family had held for generations were suddenly being reconsidered. Invitations to important social events stopped arriving. Old friends crossed the street to avoid them. The comfortable life Cedric had always known began to crumble, and Grasha saw it all. She saw what loving her was costing him. "Perhaps I should return to my people," she said one night, her massive frame curled up on their bed, trying to take up as little space as possible in a world that had no room for her. "This isn't working, Cedric. I'm destroying your life." "No," he said, holding her hand, his fingers barely able to wrap around two of hers. "We'll make it work. We just need time. They'll come around." But time only made things worse. The breaking point came during the Harvest Festival, 2 years into their marriage. Cedric had convinced Grasha to attend, hoping that seeing her participate in human traditions might soften some hearts. She wore her finest clothes, traditional orc ceremonial garb that she'd painstakingly explained to him, the patterns telling the story of her clan's honor and her own achievements. To her people, it was deeply respectful. To the humans of Aldermoor, it looked like a monster playing dress-up. A group of drunk merchants surrounded them in the festival square. They started with insults, escalated to threats, and when Grasha tried to calm the situation, one of them threw a stone. It struck her in the temple, drawing green blood that looked black in the torchlight. Cedric snapped. He attacked the merchant who'd thrown it, and suddenly they were in the middle of a brawl. The city guard arrived and, seeing an orc at the center of the conflict, immediately assumed Gracia was the aggressor. They grabbed her, forced her to her knees, called her a savage and a beast. "She didn't do anything," Cedric screamed, but his voice was lost in the chaos. It took the intervention of a city official, someone who knew Cedric's father, to prevent her from being dragged to the dungeons. But the damage was done. Gracia walked home in silence, blood still trickling from her temple, her amber eyes empty. That night, Theron delivered an ultimatum. He came to their small home, the one Cedric had bought with his own savings since his father refused to help, and laid out the choice in brutal simplicity. End this marriage, denounce her publicly, and you can return to the family. Your inheritance will be secured. Your position in society will be restored. Continue down this path, and you will be disowned completely. No money, no name, no future. Cedric looked at his father, then at Gracia, who sat silently in the corner, making herself as small as her massive frame would allow. "Get out," Cedric told his father. "I made a vow. I love her. Nothing you say will change that." Theron left without another word. 2 days later, Cedric was formally removed from House Aldwyn. His inheritance was gone. His family name meant nothing. He was, for all intents and purposes, a nobody. And he told himself it didn't matter. He had Gracia. Love was enough. But it ate at him. Every day it ate at him a little more. The struggle to find work without his family name, the constant fighting, the looks of disgust, the isolation. He began to drink more, to come home angry, to snap at Gracia over small things that didn't matter. She endured it all with the patience of stone. She found work where she could, hard labor that humans wouldn't do, jobs that paid a fraction of what they should because employers knew she was desperate. She came home exhausted every night, her green skin covered in bruises and cuts, and still she tried to make their tiny home warm and welcoming. "I love you," she'd say, even when he was cold to her. "This will pass. We'll make it through." But Cedric was drowning. The man he'd been, confident, idealistic, believing that love conquered all, was being slowly crushed under the weight of reality. He started to resent her, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because loving her had cost him everything, and he wasn't strong enough to bear that cost without bitterness. The end came on a night of freezing rain, much like tonight. They'd been married for 3 years. Cedric had been offered a job, a real job, a chance to rebuild his life, but only if he came alone, only if he left the orc situation behind. He came home and found Gracia preparing dinner with the meager supplies they could afford. She smiled when she saw him, that careful smile that hid her tusks, trying so hard to be what the human world wanted her to be, and something in him broke. "I can't do this anymore," he said. The wooden spoon in her massive hand stopped stirring. "What? Us? This? I can't. Gracia, I'm sorry, but I can't keep living like this. I've lost everything. My family, my future, my entire life. And for what? So we can barely survive in this hovel? So I can watch you come home bleeding every day? So I can be spat on in the streets?" Her amber eyes filled with something that looked like understanding, and that made it worse. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She just nodded slowly. "You want me to leave?" He couldn't even say it. Coward that he was. He couldn't even say the words. She said them for him. "You want the annulment. You want your old life back. I'm sorry." She stood there for a long moment, this towering woman who could have broken him with one hand, but had only ever touched him with love. Then she removed the simple iron ring he'd given her, all he could afford on their wedding day, and placed it on the table. "I understand," she said quietly. "Love should not feel like a prison. If this is what you need to be free, then I release you from your vow." "Gracia." "No." Her voice was firm now, the warrior's strength returning. "If you stay now, you will only grow to hate me more. Better to end it while we can still remember the love. I will go back to my people." But she didn't. That was the truth Cedric learned too late, the truth that now made his knees weak as he stood before her in the rain. She never made it back to her people. After Cedric secured the annulment through the church, a process made easier by sympathetic clergy who believed it had been a mistake from the start, he threw himself into rebuilding his life. His father welcomed him back with the cold satisfaction of a man proven right. The job offer came through. Contracts were restored. Within a year, Cedric was back in society's good graces, though whispers about his shameful dalliance with a beast followed him for years. He told himself Gracia was fine, She was strong. She'd returned to her clan. She was probably better off without him. He never checked. He never asked. He was too ashamed, too relieved to be free of the burden, too focused on reclaiming what he'd lost. For 5 years he lived this lie, until tonight, until the rain, until he saw her huddled against that wall with a begging cup in her massive hands. "Gracia," he said again, kneeling down so he could meet her eyes. Up close, the transformation was devastating. She'd lost weight, significant weight for an orc, leaving her frame gaunt in a way that looked unnatural. Her skin, once vibrant green, had a grayish tinge of malnutrition. One of her tusks was chipped. What happened to you?" She turned her face away. "It doesn't matter. Tell me, please." For a long moment, she was silent. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "I tried to go home. After we ended it, I traveled for 3 weeks to reach Ironbark territory. But when I arrived," her hands clenched around the wooden cup, "my mother had declared me dead. She held a funeral pyre. In her eyes, in the eyes of the clan, I had betrayed our people by marrying a human. By choosing you, I had chosen exile. There was no place for me there anymore." Cedric felt ice in his veins. "But surely they would—" "The Orcish code of honor is absolute, Cedric. You knew that. I knew that. When I left forever. I thought your love would be worth it. I thought we would build a new life together." She laughed, a broken sound. "I was a fool. So you came back to Aldermoor? Where else could I go? I had no clan, no family. I thought perhaps I could find work. But you know how humans see orcs. The jobs I could get barely paid enough to survive. And when the war started, the border war, 2 years ago, yes, suddenly every orc was viewed as a potential spy or enemy. I lost what little work I had. I tried moving to other cities, but the story was the same everywhere. No one wants an orc. No one trusts us. And her voice cracked. I had nothing left to sell but my pride." Cedric's hands were shaking. "Gracia, I didn't know. I thought you went back to your people. I thought you were safe. I never imagined—" "You never asked." There was no anger in her voice, which somehow made it worse. Just a statement of fact. He had no response to that. It was true. He'd been so desperate to move on, to forget, to pretend that chapter of his life had never happened, that he'd never once wondered what became of her. Rain continued to fall around them. Merchants hurried past, giving them a wide berth. A wealthy human kneeling before an orc beggar was strange enough that people preferred not to get involved. "I have money," Cedric said suddenly, reaching for his coin purse. "I have a home. I don't want your charity." The warrior's pride flashed in her eyes for just a moment before dimming again. "I just want to survive another day. It's not charity. I owe you this. More than this. Gracia, what I did to you, how I left things. You made a choice. I don't blame you for it. Love failed us. Or perhaps we failed love. Either way, it's done. It doesn't have to be done." The words came out before he'd fully thought them through, but once spoken, he realized they were true. "Come with me. Let me help you. I have a house. It's large. There's room. You can stay there until you get back on your feet. I can help you find proper work, introduce you to people who—" "Cedric." She said his name like a prayer and a curse at once. "Look at yourself. Look at me. You're clean, well-fed, wearing clothes that cost more than I've seen in months. I'm begging in the street like an animal. You've built your life back. Don't destroy it again for me. What kind of life is it if I walk away from you now?" He grabbed her massive hand with both of his. "I failed you once. I was weak and selfish, and I put my comfort above your well-being. I've spent 5 years trying to forget what I did, trying to justify it, trying to convince myself that you were fine. But you weren't fine. You were here, suffering, alone, because of me. The annulment was my idea, because you saw how miserable I was, because you loved me enough to set me free even though it destroyed you." His voice rose, drawing more stares from passers-by. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve your understanding. But please, please let me try to make this right." Gracia looked at him for a long time, her amber eyes searching his face for something. Sincerity, perhaps, or proof that this wasn't just guilt talking. Finally she spoke. "Your father will disown you again. Then let him. The merchants will stop doing business with you. I'll find others. The entire city will turn against you. Then we'll leave the city." "Cedric." Her voice broke and he saw tears beginning to form in her eyes. The first real emotion she'd shown since he found her. "Why would you do this? You know how it ends. We've lived this story before." Love isn't enough to bridge the gap between our worlds. He thought about that for a moment, rain streaming down his face, his knees aching from kneeling on the cold stone. Then he said, "You're right. Love alone isn't enough. It also requires courage, and sacrifice, and commitment even when things get hard. 5 years ago, I had love, but I lacked everything else. I was a coward who put his own comfort above the person he claimed to cherish most." He squeezed her hand. "I can't change the past. I can't give you back the 5 years you lost, but I can be the man I should have been from the start. I can choose you, fully and completely, knowing exactly what it will cost. And when the cost becomes too high again, then we face it together. Not with me building resentment while you shoulder the burden alone." He pulled her hand to his chest, placing it over his heart. "I love you, Gracia. I never stopped. I just became too weak to fight for that love, but I'm not that man anymore." She was crying now, tears streaming down her green cheeks, and Cedric realized he was crying too. Around them, the city of Aldermore went about its business, uncaring and unchanged. But between them, in this small moment on a rain-soaked street, something profound was shifting. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she whispered. "I know. I'll have to earn that, however long it takes. I don't know if I can survive being abandoned again. Then I won't abandon you. Ever. The world will not make this easy. When has it ever?" And there, in the rain, with a broken woman who had once been his wife and a broken man who had once abandoned her, something impossible happened. Gracia allowed herself to hope. Just a little. Just enough. She didn't say yes. She didn't leap into his arms or declare that all was forgiven. But she did nod, slowly, and whisper, "One chance. That's all I can give you. That's all I need." Cedric helped her to her feet. An absurd image, this small human trying to lift a massive orc, but she allowed it. He gathered her few possessions. The wooden cup, the sign, a bundle wrapped in cloth that contained what little she owned. Then, with his hand in hers, they began walking through the streets of Aldermore. People stared. Of course they stared. But Cedric didn't look away, didn't hide, didn't make excuses. He walked with his head high, holding the hand of an orc woman who had given up everything for him, who he had betrayed, and who he was now choosing again despite knowing exactly what it would cost. They reached his home, the large house his father had given him when he rejoined the family. Gracia hesitated at the door, looking at the fine architecture, the expensive materials. "This is too much," she said. "It's barely enough." He opened the door and gestured inside. "You'll have your own room, privacy, time to heal and recover. No expectations, no pressure. Just a safe place to exist." She stepped inside slowly, her massive frame filling the doorway. The warmth of the interior hit her like a physical force after so many months in the cold, and her knees nearly buckled. Cedric caught her, or tried to. Really, she just leaned against him, letting him support a fraction of her weight. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you." Over the next weeks, Cedric kept his promise. He set Gracia up in the largest guest room, brought her food, gave her space to recover. He didn't push for reconciliation or romance. He simply showed up, day after day, proving through actions that his words in the rain had been genuine. And, as expected, the consequences came swiftly. His father learned of Gracia's presence and immediately showed up to deliver another ultimatum. This one final. "Choose the orc or choose your family. Choose your comfortable life or choose this madness." Cedric chose Gracia. Without hesitation. Without regret. Theron disowned him again. This time permanently. Contracts were canceled. Social invitations stopped. Old friends turned away. The life Cedric had fought so hard to rebuild crumbled for the second time. But something was different now. This time, Cedric didn't resent it, didn't blame Gracia, didn't grow bitter. He'd made his choice with full knowledge and full commitment, and that made all the difference. Gracia watched it happen with growing concern. "You're losing everything again," she said one evening. "No," Cedric replied, setting down the letter that had just arrived. Another merchant severing ties. "I'm choosing what actually matters. There's a difference." Slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild trust. Not the rushed, passionate romance of their youth, but something deeper, something earned through patience and proven reliability. Cedric showed Gracia through 1,000 small actions that he wasn't going anywhere, and Gracia gradually allowed herself to believe it. They talked about their mistakes, the ways they'd failed each other the first time. Cedric admitted his weakness, his prioritization of comfort over commitment. Gracia acknowledged her own part, her tendency to shoulder burdens alone, her refusal to ask for help until it was too late. We can't change who we are, Grasha said. I'm Orc. You're human. The world will always see us as wrong. Then maybe the world needs to change its definition of right, Cedric replied. They made a plan. Aldermore had rejected them. Fine. There were other places, other opportunities. The borderlands between human and Orc territories were expanding, places where mixed populations were slowly learning to coexist. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth doing ever was. 3 months after that rain-soaked reunion, they left Aldermore together, this time as equal partners making a choice together, rather than one person sacrificing for the other. As they walked through the city gates for the last time, Grasha asked, "Do you regret it? Giving up everything?" Cedric looked at her. This powerful, gentle, incredible woman who he'd failed once but would never fail again, and smiled. "I regret the 5 years I wasted. I regret the pain I caused you. But this?" He squeezed her massive hand. "This is the first thing I've done in years that doesn't feel like a regret waiting to happen." The road ahead was uncertain. There would be challenges, prejudice, struggle, but they would face it together. Both of them changed by loss. Both of them choosing love not out of naive idealism, but out of hard-won wisdom. Sometimes love isn't enough on its own. Sometimes it needs to be paired with courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to keep choosing each other even when the world says you're wrong. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what actually matters. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get a second chance to do it right. As they disappeared down the road leading to the borderlands, a new chapter of their story beginning, one truth remained. The man who found his Orc ex-wife begging in the street had indeed been destroyed. But from that destruction, something stronger had been built. Something that might actually last. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the true cost of love and the courage it takes to fight for it against all odds, then subscribe to Orc-Bound Tales for more epic fantasy stories that will touch your heart. Hit that like button if you believe love deserves a second chance, and share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to choose what truly matters. Because in the end, the bravest thing we can do isn't fighting monsters. It's fighting for the people we love, even when the whole world stands against us.